All right, everyone. Welcome to the Amplified Opera team.
Thank you.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
Can we go around the room and just do a quick hello? My name is, and what you do at Amplified Opera. How about we start with Marion?
Hi, my name is, excuse me. Hello, my name is Marion. I'm a mezzo-soprano, co-founder of Amplified Opera, and a newly a dramaturge, and various other pandemic-related jobs that have happened. Teiya.
Thanks, Marion. Hi, my name is Teiya Kasahara. My pronouns are they, them. I'm an opera singer, an interdisciplinary theater maker, performer, and also a co-founder of Amplified Opera. I'll pass it to Asitha.
Hello. Asitha Tennekoon. My pronouns are he, him. I am an opera singer, creator, co-founder of Amplified Opera. And that's me, Aria.
Hi, my name is Aria. I am pronouns she, her. I am a co-founder of Amplified Opera, a stage director, and just a general jack of all trades, master of none in this world. Thank you so much for having us, Jenna.
Yeah, of course. Master of none, I don't think so, but I am updating my name because I forgot to include pronouns, which I will do. My name is Jenna Simeonov. My pronouns are she, her. I am social media manager and digital content writer for Opera Canada. And we're all here to talk about old operas and racial stereotypes, because why not? So I know that this is something that you guys have all sort of pondered separately and as a group. And I sent over a list of questions that I know will get us started. If we don't do some sort of clean linear thing this morning, that's okay with me. But I gave a few examples when I first reached out to you about operas that we're talking about here. So operas like the Magic Flute, Madama Butterfly, Turandot, Otello, the Mikado, all these things that are, old and charming and firmly placed in the operatic canon and also very problematic. So if I could just sort of ask a basic question to get us started, are these specific operas, would you consider them to be racist? Anybody?
Yes.
I put an emoji as my reaction.
Right.
I mean, I think that we really slow down our ability to progress through conversations when we have to justify the fact that there is troubling material in some of these operas. I think each and every one of us on this Zoom call today, like at our core, loves opera, and in fact loves a number of these titles that have these harmful stereotypes in them. But I think we love them for our own personal reasons and with clear eyes as to the politics of the piece, the depictions and appropriations of culture in the piece. And when we engage with them, we try and do it in such a way that acknowledges that that is what we're dealing with. So I think, hopefully by this point, this is not a new discussion in opera. This is not a new discussion with artists in opera. I hope that we're very soon beyond the point where we have to start by justifying that there are racist elements to these operas.
I mean, can you describe, just for the, just to be very blunt about it, like what are the stereotypes that we should be focusing on? Like what are the details in these pieces that make them racist? For me, it's sort of the unhinged, more monostatos kind of idea in Flute, but are there other examples that you could just pick out?
I would say anything that doesn't allow a set of people to progress to be who we really are in today's world, who firmly places us in like a cartoonish way, or just something that is so stuck in the past and so through the lens of somebody who hasn't made an entire being because they were creating someone based on stereotypes and based on a narrow view of that person. So without getting into naming individual ones, anything that makes you feel uncomfortable when you're watching it. And for me, I've definitely been uncomfortable watching certain things because I realized that, like, if anybody believed that this was really how people are, they would be getting just the wrong view entirely. So is there a way of addressing that? Yes, definitely. But I think by dancing around the subject and by trying to massage it and not really just saying, yes, it's racist. It's depicting people incorrectly. And that is not fair. And it's appropriation at best. Instead of actually asking those people for their stories, then yeah, it's a big problem.
I think what's harmful is that we only have a smattering of, say, non-white narratives in the operatic canon. And that very, very small sample size has kind of risen to the top and been placed on a pedestal as like epitomizing, say, that specific culture or that specific experience in a very specific time. But we need to understand that those stories were created by white, cisgendered men, and that their perspective was very pertaining to that and not of the culture that they were trying to demonstrate or to illustrate through their opera, through the music, through how they interacted. We see there are so many inaccuracies, but it's very easy to let an opera like Madame Butterfly, like Magic Flute, just kind of wash over you and enjoy the whole spectacle and the whole experience without recognizing that there are so many microaggressive racist moments and even overtly racist moments and just cultural inaccuracies in general. So yeah, that harm is where we think, okay, this one opera, Madame Butterfly, for example, this is Japanese culture, and then the book is closed. But it doesn't make room for the rich experience and variety, say, of that culture to enter mainstream conversation and mainstream art.
Yeah, because at that point it becomes the composer and librettist and like the creators of that opera, their priority becomes entertainment. And how can that othered identity and that othered culture be presented in a way that their target audience can find interesting or can be entertained by it? And that just leaves a lot of room for misrepresentation, because when these pieces were created, those cultures didn't have any input, didn't have any agency to, like Marion said, present their truth and their stories the way they would like them to be presented.
And I just want to add like a tiny thing. I think that's Asitha's touched on what I think is at the core of what we're saying, which is that ultimately racism is an expression of a power dynamic. It is one culture, a group of people or a person asserting dominance over another, saying your culture is mine. I've reduced it to an aesthetic because I find it captivating or pretty. I don't need to do much more work into engaging with this culture. I will just take what I need, create the art I want, and then put it out there. And then on the flip side of that, if we're to take an example like Madama Butterfly, creating practices that actually prevent that culture from engaging with the material. So in the example of Yellowface was not only a way to East Asian people and in its development, but it was used as justification for keeping people out of those roles and out of those spaces, right? We don't need to engage with Asian creators because we've got this practice of yellow face, that we can just, anybody can be Japanese, anybody can sing Butterfly. It doesn't matter. So it's that 1-2 punch of reducing a culture to its aesthetic, to an aesthetic, deciding that you can use that in whatever way you want without the input of the culture, and then creating practices that exclude that culture from participating in the creation of that art. That's how I would express, that's how I would define it, I think.
Yeah. I never actually thought about that facet of yellow face, about just how anybody can be Asian. Like that's pretty insane. I mean, I just want to back up a little bit because you mentioned that I agree, it's a waste of time to try to convince, the fanciulla rules. It's can be frustrating and a waste of time to try to make the case for these operas being racist. I mean, where do you have to make the convincing case? Like, what are people sort of not accepting on the first statement of this kind of idea?
I think the thing you most often hear is that, well, it was written a long time ago, so we can't expect any better from them.
And wanting to preserve that tradition or reenact or make come alive, that show when it was premiered, that kind of, so it's the act of museum theater, wanting to just keep perpetuating traditional productions in their original form.
Yeah, we like to hold on to the old stuff in opera.
Yeah, we don't tend to realize that it's actually still doing harm. That like somebody like me might be in the audience for Fanciulla del West, which I was one time. And, in the old score, it says that Billy Jackrabbit is a red Indian and that Welkel is his squaw. And that's racist. It's really hard for me to hear and kind of shocking for me to see on stage. And it makes me think, oh, I'm not going to bring my parents to this because or my sister or brother. So.
Yeah.
I also think a lot of times that the argument against I don't think people argue that they're not racist. I think they find ways to justify the racism. And one of the things that I encounter in various forms is that this is art. It's not real. And therefore it doesn't like thoughts and feelings should be expressed and they don't have any kind of intrinsic harm, which is, I think, a incredibly beautiful aspirational thought to work towards, where thoughts and aesthetic choices have no real world impact or consequences. Like, is that a world I would love to inhabit? Sure. Absolutely. But I think that often the people who are putting forward those arguments have the luxury of not having to consider being able to intellectualize these issues. They are sitting in a place that allows them to come at these problems from a purely intellectual perspective and not really acknowledging the current situation that we're in. So like in theory, yes, I'm like, thoughts, there should be freedom of thought, freedom of expression. People should be able to grapple with material that troubles or inspires them freely. Absolutely. Is that just like a blanket thing that we can apply across the board all the time with no consideration as to the impact of our actions in the real world? I don't think we're there yet as a society. And I think that when we kind of like double down on this idea that it's just art, not only do we undermine the importance of what we do for the public when we create art, it's not just art, it's much more than that. But I think we ignore the very real lived experiences of people and communities now who are expressing how these things are hurting and harming and impacting them as communities now. And I think that that should be taken into consideration when we choose to engage with these materials.
And we should consider the fact that lots of art has been decided that it doesn't count, that we don't need to continue watching or hearing those because they were offensive in some way. And so which of those, why were those offensive or like considered offensive, and the things that we continue to perform not? Who are they about is really the answer.
And so what do we do about the sort of the passage of time situation where, obviously, people were writing these things a long time ago with a different sort of set of how to treat people and how to think about people, especially people from places you've never been, individuals that you've never actually encountered other than just sort of this fantasy idea. So what do we do? Like, do the creators get the benefit of the doubt? Do the people who love the pieces now get the benefit of the doubt? Like, what do we do? Do we shelve everything previous to, May 2020, because we now have an even fresher kind of perspective on how to deal with this kind of thing? Yeah, what do we do with all the old stuff that people still like to love, including us, right?
I think that is a really complex, multi-layered question and answer. There is no one answer. And I think right now, I'm going to just speak from myself. Right now, I'm in a time where I'm exploring like what to do, how to repair, how to heal from the harm personally, but culturally and professionally, looking at the canon. I don't think cancel culture is the answer, just simply just stopping. But I think there needs to be much more reflection, conversation, dialogue between all the parties involved, between and discussing how to go forward, how there can be reconciliation. And I'm just going to borrow some of those phrases from Truth and Reconciliation Commission, that like we need to be honest with ourselves. We need to be truthful before we can reconcile, before we can start to heal. So I don't know. And I also think it's a very personal response and experience as well. So I try not to judge others for what they feel is right or what they feel that they need to do. And I also try not to judge myself too, because I know I'm still constantly exploring how to move forward.
I think they can still be really instructive, as well as being full of beautiful music. And I'm thinking about how I took a class, I audited a class years and years ago about cartoons and like just how inappropriate they were way back when, and that I had to actually see them to believe it and to understand. But it was under guidance so that nothing went unseen or misunderstood in the class. We really talked about everything and why it was connected to something that was harmful today. And I think that has value for sure. And if we're willing to allow these things to be shown alongside a narrative that says, this is what doesn't work, and just point it out so that everybody actually understands, and maybe the discussion will actually move somewhere, instead of just the fear of what if we pointed those things out, will we make things worse?
It makes me also realize how important it is, going back to the first question, how important it is to just accept that some of these are problematic from the get-go when decisions are being made to present them or to program them in a season. Because as opposed to approaching it from purely, this is a great show, it'll be great entertainment thing, it also is paired from that initial stage of planning as to, okay, who do we have in the room making this decision? about presenting this piece? Whom do we bring into the room? Whom do we have conversations with to even figure out if we should be performing this piece, given whatever community we are trying to reach or whatever community we already have as an organization? So like Teiya said, I think it is complicated in that I see it as being a different outcome or a different decision-making process, depending on the community, depending on the organization. And it has to be a living conversation. And like, as to the composer and the librettist, they're not around. So to me, that doesn't matter.
Oh, Marion, did you want to go?
I just want to quickly say that instead of thinking like we deserve to see and hear these pieces, we deserve to understand better what is harmful about them.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, I'm really not one who thinks in absolutes. Like, I don't know that there's a world where something is never acceptable and something is always acceptable. Mostly just because I think the world evolves so quickly that once you fix things into place, they're already kind of like irrelevant. So you have to leave space for things to evolve. And so I do think that for a lot of these pieces, there can be a future for their performance and their enjoyment. And that there's an opportunity for many people from many different intersections of identities rather, to engage with these pieces, even the ones where we're, focused on only certain intersections of identities are allowed to engage with these pieces. So Madama Butterfly, I think there's a world where someone who's not Japanese can direct a really impactful butterfly somewhere down the line. I don't know what that will look like, but I do believe that that's possible. What I think it boils down to for me is that everything needs to just go slower, right? Like, we can't just put these on without thinking about what we're doing or why we're doing them or why we've engaged this specific people. We can't just throw anybody into any role without consideration. I think there should be some thought and some ownership of our curatorial as producers of opera, not just performers of opera. There should be some thought into why we're making the artistic decisions that we've made, and be as clear-eyed as possible about that decision-making process. Because as long as it's serving that central thesis, and that thesis is something that we want to be expressing out in the world. So we're staging Madama Butterfly for X audience in X city at this time. Why are we doing that? And then as long as all of the subsequent decisions feed into that central thesis, like, I think there's a lot of opportunity for a lot of these titles moving forward. But it's when we just sort of do them and cast them and hire the creative team, and then we're like, whoops, got to go back and figure out why we're doing this now. That it becomes tangly, it becomes difficult. So I think that there is a real future for a lot of these titles. I do think, artists, there's this wonderful article, and I'm by Coco Fusco, a think piece in a blog piece for hyperallergic. And she says, artists explore things that trouble them. Right? It's not that I think that we should be removing all explorations of harm and trauma from our stages, but I think that we should be thoughtful about it, and not just throw it out there. And I think to be thoughtful, you need to give yourself enough time to think through the details.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think you sort of touched on something that I think a lot of people, I can speak for myself, and probably the group of people I'm thinking of are largely white people who are interested in opera because of something objective, like the music or this amazing use of the human voice, which I can speak for myself. And so a piece like Butterfly, which I've always loved, and I found identity with Cho-Cho-san because of her naivety. And I've been the person that believed too hard in something and was super hopeful about something. And I was so disappointed when it didn't work out, even though in hindsight, I should have been very ready for it to not work out. That's the kind of thing that I connected with. And that's the kind of thing that just like breaks me every time I see the opera. But I was also not ever, it was not necessary for me to consider the cultural meaning in the piece. And so when these conversations started to get louder and more frequent, all of a sudden people like me, I can speak for myself. I was like, I've been complicit, like without ever meaning to be, because I just liked the piece and I just wanted to see it because it's a great piece. You know, I would go see it anywhere it was playing because I just love that piece. And I saw it, you know, with Japanese people involved and mostly without Japanese people involved. And that was fine for me. But I wonder if, like, what do we do about the people who the reason to put something on is because the music is amazing, or the reason to put it on is because it's this amazing sweeping story that is also reductive. Like, the reason that Cho-Cho-san is naive is because she's Japanese. It's because Japanese people are like submissive, and especially Japanese women. That's what I'm realizing about the piece, but it wasn't what hit me first. And so I think I can sense that the resistance is looking for the reason to put on a piece like this, where a lot of people would just say, the reason is because it's excellent, or because the music is extraordinary. I mean, what do we do with this reasoning?
My initial reaction to that is, if opera companies want to keep widening their scope and widening their audience, at what point do you say, okay, this is harmful to X community, but we're going to do it anyway? You're immediately excluding that community, or saying you don't really care about how they feel about it, as long as your, you know, traditional audience or a certain set of donors are happy to see this show put on. So I think it's a matter at that point of relevance and survival. And yeah, it seems so short-sighted to just say, we're going to do this piece because it's beautiful, the end. I don't think that's the world we live in. At least I don't think that's the world a lot of people opera wants to reach out to right now live in. And approaching it with a generative frame of mind, and a frame of mind of, how do we present this in a way that best can serve and call in other communities. Sorry, I shouldn't say other communities. Can serve and call in any given community. How do we make that happen?
I mean, the way I phrased the question, I still want to use it, but my question was, are pieces like this, are they quote unquote good enough to sort of balance out the stereotypes that they disseminate, right? So works that sort of stay at the top 10 of the canon, the ones that we're talking about, is good enough what we're talking about? Does that have anything to do with yeah.
I mean, I will say, like, good is subjective, and it is a measurement system that we've come up with, right? So like, it's not that there is some intrinsic truth about this piece that makes them better. It's that we have decided, we have formed over the course of many centuries in opera an understanding of what good opera, quote unquote good opera, is, and we measure against our own standards. It's a game that we can always win, if we decide that we want to measure every opera, and specifically these operas. If we want to measure Madama Butterfly against a set of criteria that we have cultivated in this culture, then Madama Butterfly is going to win every time, right? If we decide that the measurement, the criteria for excellence actually has different elements to it, that it's not just these things that make great opera, but that it's also these things, that's when Madama Butterfly, I'm using that as an example since that's the one we're talking about, but like any of these pieces, Carmen, Otello, Fanciulla del West, any of these, the Mikado, that's when some of these pieces stop being so excellent and start being maybe not the most excellent pieces, you know? Like if we've decided that the only way to judge the awesomeness of a piece is based on musical criteria, and musical criteria alone, and that's it, then of course something like Madama Butterfly is going to win. There's nothing, yeah. But if we accept that this is a set of criteria that we have cultivated, we in the industry, audience members alike, then we can also accept that we can add new criteria to a piece. And then when we measure these pieces again against our own devised criteria, as we have been for centuries, then these pieces stop looking as excellent as they previously, they stop looking like examples of excellence within our art form. And the playing field is somewhat more level, in my opinion.
I think that speaks to the desire to decolonize opera, to decentralize or take off these works from their pedestals, to critique them from different lenses, say, than just, you know, our very Eurocentric Western classical music lens, and that history of only that lens, or what great art is from, again, a very Eurocentric viewpoint. If we, throwing in these different lenses, this is speaking to what Aria had just said, but it's not okay just to look at these works just with one lens and prioritizing that one thing as your one or the most important criteria, is like, because the music is so beautiful. And yes, I completely agree, but all of this and all of this.
I keep thinking, like, what if we put ourselves in the shoes of the people that the opera purports to be about and pretended it was about us? How comfortable do we feel about it then? And just to think more empathetically about, what if this was about me? How would I feel if this was based on my culture? And all of us have cultures. We can actually trace that back. And so what's actually sacred about the piece, the music? Then what if the setting erases all of the racist tropes? And why do we choose one and not the other? I think opera has an actual tradition of changing and fitting the narrative of the day. And we've forgotten that with the canon. And we think that it needs to be stuck in one way. And we do get upset when we watch some modernized version where the music's the same, but it's set in a train station or whatever, like modern day. So why is that upsetting when the music is the same? And what is it that we're really hanging on to? Why do we need to see and hear the words that are hurtful to others? Why aren't we empathetic to that issue?
So would you consider it a solution to program these works like this and have the entire, or mostly like the entire cast and creative team full of BIPoC people? Is that enough of a change of lens, I suppose?
Who's leading those people? Who's the director? Who's the conductor? Who decided to program it in the first place? Who cast it? Like, all of that matters too.
I'll also add that people are more than one thing. First of all, I think visibility and representation are so important, but we also can't lose sight of the whole person. BIPoC people, by virtue of their identity, cannot fix these pieces. The document is the document. the politics of the piece are the politics of the piece, and just stacking a production team full of BIPoC people is not in and of itself going to resolve these pieces. My question would still be, how is this piece being handled? What freedom is there to reframe, comment on, challenge the piece? And that for me, if BIPoC or IPoC artists who are being called upon to continue the same cycles, to enact the same harm, to not challenge the same material over and over again is not a solution for me. It helps in a cosmetic sense and in seeing representation in some of those crucial places. But I think ultimately I always go back to like, what is this story we're telling? And if the story itself is fundamentally unchallenged, then we're still doing the same thing. We've just put a new veneer over it. So I think that BIPoC artists should be allowed to create anything they want in any piece, go anywhere, should be allowed to bring as much of themselves or not as much of themselves to a piece as they want to. Yeah, for me, would always bring it back to the art and say, like, what story are we telling? And is this continuing the same cycle of harm? And just also point out that a cast of BIPoC artists does not itself resolve the politics of a piece.
Asitha, you look like you've been wanting to say something for a while.
No, I've actually I've been agreeing silently, probably nodding my head way more than I should, because I mean, these are conversations that we have over and over again, but the truth of it doesn't subside. Yeah, it's again, who's in the room, who's making those decisions? I think too many times, even with non-problematic pieces, it's very often, oh, like, would you like to be, would you like to be part of the creative team for this show? And there's no agency or no information shared at all about who else is there, who else is doing it, who else do I get to work with? Do we get to have conversations with each other about what this piece could look like and how it could be formed? And it comes back to, I think, what some of the things that we talked about, even from an organizational and administrative perspective, where just after everything that's happened in this past year, just putting people of color or BIPoC people in positions of power, for example, in an organization, doesn't change the hierarchy that has already been there. And it's the same thing with creative teams as well. And I'm not saying anything new that Aria and everyone else here hasn't already shared, so I'll keep this brief. But just putting people in there to perpetuate a system that is in place without giving them the agency and the space to change that system and to change how a story needs to be presented, that just continues doing the same harm, and now to probably more people than before.
Yeah, because if it doesn't work, then you get to say, well, we tried, didn't work, let's go back to the way it was before. And that is not helpful. Yeah. Sorry, I had to get a delivery, but I'm back.
Okay. Yeah, it's a silly, because I wanted to sort of also, because I think this argument also extends to sort of the prevalence of misogyny in opera, which is a thing, and it's very like, it's not just there, it's like there, and like they're digging in, because it's like it's a storytelling device to have a woman like, corseted up and like literally and sort of figuratively, and just sort of being a victim of everything. Like, again, like there are pieces like Rigoletto and Lucia di Lammermoor and La Traviata even, like that you just sort of feel like this could be so easily solved by having a woman who can just make a decision for herself, or have a freedom, any freedom. I mean, yeah, is that, but that wouldn't sort of, do you think that's still about framing the story right? Like, it wouldn't be solved by having top down only women involved in producing these works, right?
You have to let them shake things up and not think that they're just being difficult if they're making a decision you don't agree with, right? You have to actually challenge yourself to say, why is this bothering me? What do I need to learn to make this better? And not just think, well, this is just too much, and it's too far outside of the frame that I've been putting it in for a long time. But what is it about me that's not cool with this being shaped differently, with the end changing, or yeah, whatever needs to be changed to make it something that fits where I hope we are and are continuing to go today in our understanding.
And just to add, I think it's about widening perspectives on all entry points of opera making and opera performing, like not just with sensitive casting or sensitive creative teams or leadership, but it's about looking at that document and not being so beholden to it too. You know, we are much more liberal with reinterpreting Shakespeare, reinterpreting other canonical works in the theater canon, in other places, so we can, as 21st century artists, like really investigate that art from back then, but bring it into our reality and our contemporary times. And that score has been, again, just resting on that pedestal for so long. It's so dusty, you know, it's hard to find where exactly is it. Can we bring it down? What if we actually looked at it with multiple perspectives? And I'm not just saying that the score isn't an amazing thing. It's an amazing artwork, and also to respect it too, but to understand that there are more ways than just one way of putting on, say, Magic Flute or Madama Butterfly, and that those versions, those new versions that we haven't imagined yet, can be really exciting and still valid to be a part of audiences' experiences, artists' expression. Yeah, I lost my train of thought, but that's what was there for now.
Asitha, were you going to go?
No, go for it.
I was just going to add, we were actually joking about this on a call. I think it's like, was last week, where we were like, you know, without actually being allowed to alter the document, to alter the score or the text in any significant way, there's nothing really that can really be done that feels in line with it. Always feels like it's wrestling against the music or the text, any kind of dramatic intervention, without allowing artists to actually go into that score and futz around a bit. And we were joking, like, you know how you fix Carmen? Like, we've seen so many attempts to like rectify the politics of Carmen, and it's always like, it feels very troubling in itself. Like, Carmen killing Don Jose is not a good solution to that piece instead. You know what I mean? But we were like, here's what would fix it. If you get to the finale and Don Jose is like, tu ne m'aimes pas plus. And Carmen is like, non, je ne t'aime plus. And then Don Jose is like, okay, thank you. I respect your decision. And then Carmen is like, okay, cool. I'm going to go into the stadium now to watch my new boyfriend, slay a toro. And then Don Jose's like, okay, cool, thanks. Are you guys going to live happily ever after? And she'd be like, I'm so sorry. That's none of your business anymore. Like how long I spend with this new guy. And then Don Jose would be like, okay, yeah, you're right. That was that was inappropriate of me. And then the curtain would fall, and as it's falling, he'd yell, "Oh, and sorry about the racism." Like that's that's how that would resolve the politics. But that's like
sorry about the racism is like some high note, super heroic.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Last note of the show. Yeah.
But like by that point, you really are writing a new story. So anyway, we're without letting go of what valid interpretation of these texts are and what appropriate applications of old documents to maybe new works is, like we're kind of stuck. Though I do think that would be a hilarious ending to Carmen. I would love to see it.
I would see that.
One day.
It would be a little dull on the drama side, but it would be satisfying.
Like the last finale, you'd just be like, what is happening? This is amazing.
Yeah.
Teiya, you wanted to go?
Yeah. You wanted to talk about new works?
Yes. So I just, that thought came to back to my head. Yes, I love that. I love that option. I would definitely see that show too. I also want to mention that we as an industry, and even in our training programs, we don't emphasize enough new works and creating new works and putting resources into those new works and repeating them and having them performed so they can actually have a legitimate chance to enter the canon and stay there. But I think if we, I don't know. Like I don't know what the numbers are. I don't know what the ratio is, but say it was like 50% all about new creation, new works, elevating new voices, expanding even how these works are made, not just a composer and a librettist, but like maybe a collaborative team creating an opera and expanding even what that form is. That would be really exciting to add more 20th century, more 21st century ideas to take root into the canon. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Yeah, I'm also thinking about how like this is live performance and not museum presentation. I mean, there's a place for that, I think, for sure. But we're so, especially the time we're in right now, so fixated on changing who's where, changing who's in charge, like making things look different from that perspective without wanting to change the art itself, which doesn't make sense. And I think holding on to what the opera industry is culturally and traditionally, what brings comfort. At that point, it's like, if this is problematic to people, how like wanting to hold on to that sense of comfort, I think says a lot more about the industry than it does about people crying out for change within the industry. So
I would like to add that if, say, there are seasons that are already set with canonical works that are problematic, if those companies decide to hold space for discussion with the whole team involved, the singers who don't usually get to have a voice of any sort, but if there was like a check-in, even a daily check-in to say, what are we thinking about today and how is this landing? What are we learning from this? I think we're 5 brains talking about this right now, asking questions and probing it and coming up with maybe some possible solutions. But if you had an entire cast of people dedicating them and dedicating their thought to it and allowing them to speak freely, safely about all of it, what kind of solutions could we come up with?
So, I mean, now I thought I had an answer and I don't anymore. So I'll just pose it all to you guys to go first. But I mean, in terms of pieces that are either aging well or doing well, like if they're new pieces or they're part of the traditional canon, are there works that you sort of take to heart and decide that these are actually timeless? These have something to say back then and now, or 5 years ago when it was premiered. Do you have sort of thumbs up pieces that you want to see be part of the future? We can go Aria first because alphabetical.
Oh my, I feel like there are we like sticking to current canonical pieces?
No,
Are we?
no, I'm just hoping for some good examples.
Oh,
Yeah. Well done. Yeah, Marion.
yeah.
I mean, Marriage of Figaro, because of the
Yeah,
way it
right.
challenges hierarchy and, you know, who gets to behave certain ways. I think that that's a narrative that we can continue to bring forward.
Yeah. Okay, well, that was my pick.
I think a lot of like, I don't know, I'm just sort of I feel that moving forward, when we look at canonical pieces, I feel like we should, it should be expanded, right? Like there should just be many options of many different experiences to choose from. In terms of ones that I'm like personally rolling over right now, I think a lot of people are sleeping on Il Tabaro. Yeah, like it's the one that we always forget in Tritico, but it's like devastatingly heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And explores themes of like love and heartbreak and parenthood. And there are so many things that jump out at me about that piece, that in the context of its time, certainly there were like elements there, but at the core, it's about a couple who's lost a child and is grappling with the grief of that. And I think that that's I think we just think it's a big sing for loud voices, and it definitely is. um, but when you actually look at the nuts and bolts of what that story is about, I like weep every time. So yeah. But to the actual point of the thing, all the pieces, many pieces. Let's burst open the canon. Let's make it like fashion, where it just sort of like evolves, and we don't kind of like, there's like, we've got the little black dress, but the little black dress can be like so many different things. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. Skiki. I like the pick for Skiki. Yeah. We have a vixen vote. Yeah. Yeah. Hansel and Gretel, sort of, maybe. Listen to your parents, but be kind to your kids.
We all have, in every culture, there's some sort of like warning, like
Yeah.
do what you're told or don't go wandering in the forest alone. I think, yeah, we can keep working with that one.
Yeah. Cool. Does anyone else have anything to add? I know this is a massive topic. And I'm hoping that I'm sure we'll get some reader feedback and maybe we can pick it up again. But yeah, if anything doesn't, Aria, yeah.
Yeah, just one thought. I think that there is a huge pressure that we're placing on ourselves and the artists that create and handle these works right now, that it has to be perfect, right? Like there's a burden of perfection on these pieces, that we must put them out in a way where like zero harm occurs, or it's been an absolute failure. And I think that I personally take a long view and know that and hope that these things, the problem is we're not letting them evolve. I hope there's an evolution in some of these pieces, but that means we're going to have to go through a ton of versions before we end up at a piece that really serves us and nourishes us as a community. And I think I would just encourage people to look to focus on the process and less the product, and leave room for there to be mistakes, or for there to be things that don't feel great, or for all of those things to happen, and to keep the conversation open, like to keep keep being in dialogue with the art that you're making and creating, and to accept that it's going to have to go through an evolutionary process. And if you find you've put something out there that hasn't gone over, like that is not like the most immediate success and everyone's lauding you as a hero and cultural revolutionary, that you just be open to the feedback and to consider and try again. And for us to accept that this is a process, and we know that this is a process, and that process is going to weave through many things that are not ideal before it gets to an ideal place, but that's the work that we're trying to do right now.
Mm-hmm. Try again. I think that might be a good title for this. There we go. Thank you guys for taking the time. I know you're very busy being disruptors and all that. So I would like to do this again, maybe on another topic. Maybe we do part 2. So cool. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Jenna.
Thank you so much for this.